Okay, here we're going to investigate adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. We're going to see these three letters used quite a bit, so I figured I should help describe what this molecule actually is. Provide you with a basic picture here, and against adenosine triphosphate, so we can see the adenine and then three phosphate groups. But let's look at this in a little more detail because it is important for cellular energy. So first off, adenosine triphosphate is a multi-purpose chemical energy storage molecule. It's considered POWERS cellular work, and it's considered the energy currency of the cell. Looking at it here a little bit closer, we have an adenine molecule, a ribose sugar, which you might remember from RNA. Both of these carbons are attached to oxygen, and then three phosphate groups. The reason why it's three phosphate groups is because we're talking about ATP, adenosine triphosphate. What this shows here is the triphosphate with all three of those phosphates. If we were talking about adenosine diphosphate, the D, there would only be two phosphates, and monophosphate, there would only be one phosphate molecule. So again, here's the image from the title slide, and how do all of these molecules differ? Well, AMP, adenosine monophosphate, has one phosphate group, and as a result, the energy from bonds is a very small amount. And the energy stored is minimal. This is kind of the least energetic of the molecules. We then go up to adenosine diphosphate, where there's two. We have more energy and a greater amount of energy stored in those chemical bonds. And lastly, we have adenosine triphosphate, which has substantial amounts of energy and has the greatest amount stored in its chemical bonds. This is why we typically refer to ATP being the energy currency of the cell, because it has the most energy. But realize that ADP and AMP also do exist. So we talk about this, bond energy. Well, the energy is stored in chemical bonds of molecules. The chemical bonds are where energy is stored, and when the bond breaks, that energy is released. So this is why ATP with our three phosphates has the greatest amount of energy, because it has these high energy bonds linking these phosphate molecules together. And here we see adenosine diphosphate here. So what we need to think about this for is the law of electrical charges. Well, the bonding of phosphate groups to adenine require a considerable amount of energy. You can think of this as the energy required to kind of compress a spring together. This is the attachment of phosphate groups. Think of each phosphate group being another spring that's being compressed. When you break those bonds, you can think of the spring here kind of letting go. This energy is released when that bond is broken. So again, ATP, if you have three of these bonds together, you have that much more potential for energy. So the third phosphate, adding to ADP, would be ATP. Same thing with AMP. If we had one phosphate, we're going to see diphosphate, and another phosphate group, we're going to see triphosphate. The phosphorus is eager to get away. The bond is broken. A great amount of energy becomes released. Energy available when ATP loses a phosphate. So as we're releasing energy, we're breaking that bond, going from ATP to ADP, or ADP to AMP. The AMP, adenosine monophosphate portion of the molecules, stays the same. Adding a third phosphate group, or phosphorylation, adds energy. Think of it like I used the previous example where we're compressing that spring. Removing the phosphate group, which is released through hydrolysis, is like freeing and uncoiling that spring, releasing that energy. Lastly, here's the ATP cycle, because I want you to realize that it doesn't exist all the time as ATP. The phosphate available, the cell has an unlimited supply of energy. So as we're looking at phosphate groups, as we're able to break them down here to form ADP, and then attaching a phosphate group to ATP again, we're creating and breaking those high energy bonds, which is going to be used by the cell to perform all sorts of necessary tasks. So this energy between ADP and ADP is contained in the phosphate high energy phosphoester bond. When that's broken, energy is released, and when we're attaching that phosphate group, we're creating that potential for energy when that is broken.